My name is Marisol Ibarra. I'm 24 years old and I used to believe that if you worked hard enough inside your own family, they would eventually see you. I was wrong. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, the youngest of two and the only daughter of Roberto Ibarra. My father built Ibarra Development Group from a single duplex renovation into a company managing 14 active residential projects across Franklin County. By the time I was 17, I was filing the quarterly tax returns for the business. By 19, I was reconciling the monthly books, reviewing permit applications, and handling every client call that came in after 5 p.m. My father did not believe in voicemail. My brother Diego did not believe in answering his phone. I was good at it. Not in the way people say to be kind, I was precise. I could scan a contractor invoice and catch the inflated line items before the total finished settling in my head. I kept a separate spreadsheet for every project, color-coded by construction phase, backed up to 2 different drives every Sunday morning before church. Nobody asked me to do any of this. I did it because I thought that was how family worked. You saw a gap, you filled it, and eventually someone said your name out loud in a room that mattered. My father's office sat on the second floor of a converted warehouse on East Main Street. The carpet was thin, the windows never sealed properly in winter, and the radiator clanked every November like a pipe wrench loose inside a drum. He kept a framed photograph of the first house he ever flipped on the wall behind his desk, and a leather chair he had bought at auction the year the company cleared its first $1 million in annual revenue. He was proud of what he had built. I understood that pride. What I did not understand, not then, was that his pride had a specific shape and I was not anywhere inside it. If you are hearing this right now, I want you to think about the person in your family who does the most and gets noticed the least. Hold on to that person for a moment. That person is the reason I am telling you this story. My grandmother, my Abuela Rosa, was the one who taught me sign language. She had been deaf since she was 11, scarlet fever, though she never once described it like something that had been taken from her. To Abuela, silence was just the room she had always lived in, and she had furnished it with more warmth than most people manage with all the noise in the world. She started teaching me ASL when I was 6 years old, sitting across from each other at her kitchen table in her apartment in Hilliard with a plate of conchas between us, her hands moving slowly enough for a child to follow, and quickly enough to keep me reaching for the next word. Abuela Rosa passed when I was 21. 2 weeks before she died, she handed me a sealed envelope. Thick, manila, my full name written across the front in her careful block letters. No lo obras todavía, she signed. Not yet. She did not explain what was inside. I did not ask because with Abuela you learned early that certain things carried their own timing. I slid the envelope into the bottom drawer of my desk at my apartment, and I left it there, underneath a stack of old tax returns I had printed for the company and never been thanked for. After she died, I kept working at Ibarra Development. I kept the books. I kept the spreadsheets. I kept arriving at the warehouse at 7:30 every morning, standing outside in whatever weather Columbus decided to offer that day because I did not have a key to the building. My father had a key. Diego had a key. I had punctuality and patience, and I confused both of those things with being valued. I am telling you all of this so you understand who I was before that Tuesday morning in the lobby of Whitfield & Associates, the financial advisory firm where I had been interning for 11 weeks at $12 an hour. When I watched a 78-year-old deaf man walk through the glass front doors and get ignored by every single person in the room. Except me. The moment my father made it clear I was not part of his vision for the company. Not a temporary oversight, not an accident of scheduling, but a deliberate architectural choice. I was 22 years old. It was a Sunday in late October. He had invited the family to dinner at the house on Brennan Court, the 4-bedroom he had built custom after the company's 3rd profitable year. The dining table seated 8, but there were only 5 of us. My father at the head, my mother to his right, Diego and his wife Carmen across from each other, and me at the far end, closest to the kitchen, because someone always needed to refill the water pitcher and that someone was always me. My mother had made arroz con pollo. Her version, which involved a specific brand of saffron she ordered from a store in Chicago, and a cast-iron pot she had owned longer than she had owned her marriage. She carried the pot to the table herself and set it on the trivet without asking for help, because asking for help was not something my mother did. She provided. She did not request. My father waited until the plates were cleared and the coffee was poured. Then he set both hands flat on the surface, palms down, fingers spread, the gesture he used whenever he had already made a decision and was about to present it as a conversation. I have been thinking about the company's next step, he said. He was looking at Diego. I want to bring you on formally. Vice President of Operations. You will handle the project managers, the subcontractor relationships, the client-facing side of things. He paused. We will update the website, get new cards printed. Make it official. Diego nodded slowly, the careful nod of a person who has rehearsed his surprise. Carmen placed her hand on his arm and smiled. My mother lifted her coffee cup without drinking from it. I sat perfectly still. My chest went tight, a slow pressure like a hand pressing flat against my sternum from the inside. I waited for my father to turn toward me. To say something about the books I had been keeping, the 3 years of tax filings and permit reviews, the late nights and the early mornings, and the filing cabinet in the corner that held every record the company had ever needed and could always produce. He did not turn. I straightened the spoon beside my coffee cup so that it was perfectly parallel to the saucer's edge, and I said nothing. What about me? I asked, after a silence that no one else in the room seemed to notice. I kept my voice level. I kept my hands on the table where they were. My father looked at me. Not with cruelty, with something worse. Patience. The expression of a man explaining a simple concept to someone who should have understood it already without being told. Marisol, you have been helpful, he said. You really have. But this role needs someone who can be out in the field. Someone the contractors respect the minute he walks onto a job site. He glanced at Diego. Your brother has that presence. You know that. I do more than sit in the office, I said. I know you do, he said. He said it in the tone people use when they hear a sentence without hearing what it means. And we appreciate everything you do with the numbers, the filing, all of it. We just thought this arrangement makes more sense for where the company is heading. We. He used the word we, as though the decision had been collective, as though my mother's silence and Carmen's decorative smile and Diego's rehearsed nod constituted a vote. You should think about what comes next for you, my father continued. He picked up his coffee cup and took a slow sip. Maybe go back to school. Get a degree in something. There is no shame in finding your own direction, Marisol. My own direction. As if the direction I had been walking for years, inside his building, behind his numbers, underneath his name, had been someone else's territory the entire time, and I had simply been trespassing. Carmen asked about dessert. Diego wanted to know if there was more coffee. My mother stood up and began gathering cups she did not need to gather, and the conversation moved on without me the way conversations in that house always did. Smoothly, without friction, as though I had been a draft from a loose window that someone had quietly sealed. I was hurt, not by the decision itself, but by how long it had already been made before anyone told me. I helped my mother wash the dishes afterward. She scrubbed each plate in the same order she always did, handed it to me, and I dried it and placed it in the cabinet where she expected it to go. Neither of us said a word about what had happened at the table. When the last plate was stacked and the counter was dry, she said, "Your father loves you, Marisol. He just does not always know how to show it." I did not answer. I folded the dish towel into a tight square and hung it on the hook beside the stove. That night, sitting at my desk in my apartment, I searched for internship programs at financial advisory firms in Columbus. I found Whitfield and Associates on the 3rd page of results. They were accepting spring applicants. The posting required someone with strong organizational skills and attention to detail. I applied before midnight. I did not tell my father. I did not tell anyone. The thing about patterns is that you do not recognize them while you are standing inside them. You only see the shape after you have stepped out and turned around. Looking back, I can trace the outline of my father's decisions all the way to when I was 17 and first started handling the company's finances. He did not ask me directly. He mentioned one evening over dinner that the outside accountant was getting expensive and that someone in the family should learn to use the bookkeeping software. He said it while looking at the table, Not at me, not at Diego, just at the wood grain, as though the suggestion were intended for the furniture. I was the one who downloaded QuickBooks that night. I was the one who spent 3 weekends teaching myself the system. And I was the one who had the first clean monthly reconciliation finished before the end of that month. He said, "Good." That was all. One word, delivered without looking up from his phone. The first real incident, the one I should have read as a warning, happened when I was 19. My father had bid on a renovation contract for a row of houses on Parsons Avenue, a project worth $340,000 in total contract value. The general contractor, a man named Dale Mercer, had submitted an itemized bid that ran 11 pages. My father accepted it after reviewing only the summary page at the front. I reviewed every line. On page 7, I found a materials markup that had been calculated twice, once embedded in the per-unit cost and again as a standalone line item labeled Materials Handling Fee. The duplication added $41,000 to the total. I circled it in red, printed the relevant pages, and carried them upstairs to my father's office on a Tuesday afternoon. He was on the phone when I walked in. He waved me toward the desk without pausing his conversation. I placed the pages in front of him with the circled figure facing up and I waited, standing, until he finished the call. He looked at the pages. He looked at the number. Then he looked at me. "You are sure about this?" he said. It was not a question. "I went through it twice," I said. "The $41,000 is a duplicate charge. If you flag it, Mercer will have to revise." My father picked up the pages, studied them for a moment, and nodded once. "I will handle it," he said. He called Mercer the following morning. I heard him from the main floor. His office door was open the way it always was when he wanted the rest of the building to hear him being in charge. "Dale," he said, "we went through your numbers and found a double charge on the materials handling. Page 7. We are not paying for the same line twice." We went through your numbers." He did not say my name. He did not mention that his 19-year-old daughter, working without a title or a salary, had been the one to catch a $41,000 error that he himself had missed entirely. He said "we" with the easy authority of a man who believed that everything useful happening inside his company was, by proximity, his own accomplishment. The contract was revised. The company kept its $41,000. I returned to my desk and updated the project spreadsheet. The second incident happened 2 years later, the spring I turned 21, about 4 months before Abuela passed. Ibarra Development was pursuing its first mid-scale commercial project, a mixed-use building on West Broad Street with 4 retail units on the ground floor and 12 residential apartments above. The total estimate was $2.8 million, the largest deal the company had ever gone after. My father needed a complete presentation for the investor group. Financial projections, construction timelines, comparable property data, market analysis for the surrounding area. Diego was supposed to build it. That was what my father told the investors on the phone. "My son is putting together the full package for you." Diego built nothing. 3 days before the meeting, my father mentioned at dinner, casually, the way he mentioned everything that was about to become my problem, that the materials still needed some work. He said it while spreading butter on a piece of bread. He did not look at me. He did not need to. I spent the next 72 hours building the presentation from nothing. I pulled census and foot traffic data for the West Broad corridor. I assembled a comparable sales report covering 18 months of commercial and residential transactions within a 2-mile radius. I built the financial model in Excel, projected rental income, construction costs broken out by phase, a 5-year cash flow forecast that accounted for a 6-month lease-up period and a 7% vacancy rate. I formatted the whole thing into a 41-slide deck, printed color copies on heavy cardstock, and had them spiral-bound at the copy shop on High Street at 9 p.m. the night before the meeting. At the presentation, my father introduced Diego to the investor group as the one who put this whole package together. Diego stood up and shook hands around the table. I sat in the folding chair nearest the door, holding the backup copies in my lap in case anyone needed an extra set, which 2 of them did. Nobody introduced me. Nobody gestured toward the chair by the door and said, "That is the person who actually built every number you are looking at." My father thanked the investors for their time. Diego thanked the investors for their time. I collected the leftover copies, carried them down to my car, and drove them back to the warehouse. I filed the quarterly taxes for Ibarra Development for 5 consecutive years, from the time I was 17 until I left at 22, 20 filings total, not a single late submission, not one penalty. I reviewed 47 permit applications between 2021 and 2023, 6 of which contained errors that would have delayed city inspections by weeks. I reconciled the company's books every month for 4 straight years. I renegotiated the commercial insurance policy in 2022 and saved the company $14,200 per year going forward. And I answered every after-hours client call for 2.5 years, including the one that came in at 11:40 on a Thursday night from a homeowner whose basement had flooded during a renovation that my father's crew was responsible for. None of these contributions appeared on the company website. None of them were mentioned in the operating agreement. None of them were compensated beyond the occasional good Marisol delivered without eye contact from a man who was already thinking about the next thing he needed from me. The internship at Whitfield & Associates was not glamorous. Phones, client binders, meetings where I was not expected to speak. $12 an hour, no benefits, 40 minutes each way on the bus. But the work was clean. Nobody at Whitfield promised me a title and then handed it to someone else while I watched from the far end of a dinner table. I had been there 11 weeks when the deaf man walked in. It was a Tuesday in early March, around 9:15 in the morning. The lobby was all glass and pale gray carpet, with a reception desk staffed by a woman named Jenna, who spent most mornings looking at her phone beneath the counter. The man came through the front doors slowly. Late 70s, white hair neatly combed, wearing a dark gray suit that had become too large in the shoulders the way suits do when a person shrinks inside their own clothes. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm. He approached the desk and began signing, clear, deliberate ASL. Jenna stared at him. Do you speak English?" she asked, louder than necessary, the way people do when they confuse deafness with distance. The man signed again. 2 associates passed through the lobby behind him without stopping. He stood there, hands now still at his sides, his expression patient in the way only people who have spent decades being overlooked learn to be patient, without urgency, because urgency has never changed anything for them. I was at the intern station 12 feet away, sorting correspondence. I watched for about 15 seconds. Then I set the folders down and walked over. "Good morning," I signed. "My name is Marisol. Can I help you?" His face shifted just around the eyes. The quiet recognition that happens when someone realizes they have been seen by a person who speaks their language. "My name is Harold," he signed back. "I am here to see my daughter, Catherine Whitfield. She runs this company." My pulse caught once, a single offbeat like a skipped stair. Catherine Whitfield was the CEO. I had seen her exactly twice in 11 weeks. She moved through the building the way weather moves through a valley. "I will take you to her," I signed. I walked Harold to the elevator and up to the 3rd floor. I signed to the executive assistant that Mr. Whitfield was here to see his daughter. Catherine came out within a minute, tall, early 50s, silver-streaked hair pulled into a low knot. She hugged her father, then looked at me. Not a glance. The kind of look that happens when something has caught a person off guard and they are recalibrating. "You sign," she said. "My grandmother was deaf," I said. "She taught me when I was 6. "What is your name?" "Marisol Ibarra," I said. "I am an intern here. 11th week." "Ibarra." Something shifted in her voice. Not dramatically, but enough to notice if you had spent your life listening for the moments when a conversation turns. "Is your father Roberto Ibarra?" "Ibarra Development." My stomach tightened. "Yes." "I know your father," Catherine said. Careful, neutral, the kind of deliberate neutrality that is itself a piece of information. "His company has done work adjacent to one of our client portfolios." She paused. "I would like us to talk." "Not today. Thursday." "Of course," I said. I did not ask why. I rode the elevator back down, sat at the intern desk, and picked up the folders I had been sorting. My hands were steady. My thoughts were not. That evening, my father called. He did not call often and never without a reason. Diego had mentioned my internship to someone at a job site, and the news had reached my father by end of day. "What are you doing at that firm?" he asked. Calm but tightly controlled, the way water looks still right before something breaks through from underneath. "It is an internship," I said. "I applied months ago." "You did not tell me." "You told me to find my own direction," I said. I kept my voice even. He was quiet for several seconds. Then, "I am restructuring the company. Diego is coming in as full equity partner. There are changes to the operating agreement, and I need the paperwork clean. No loose ends." "What loose ends?" "Your grandmother," he said. He said the word the way you say a line item on a balance sheet, flat, categorical, stripped of warmth. She had certain involvement with the company in the early years. Some of the original formation documents still carry her name. I am having Attorney Navarro clean that up. I just want you to be aware. He said, clean that up the way someone says, clear the table. As though Abuela Rosa's involvement in the company she had helped him start was a smudge to be wiped away before company arrived. "I understand," I said. I did not understand. But after we hung up, I walked to my desk, opened the bottom drawer, and looked at the sealed manila envelope with my name in Abuela Rosa's block handwriting. I did not open it. Not yet. But for the first time in 3 years, I wanted to. I sat across from Catherine Whitfield in her corner office on the 3rd floor. Harold's leather portfolio, the same one he had carried through the lobby 2 days before, sat on the credenza behind her desk. The glass wall behind her looked out over the parking lot, and beyond it, a row of pin oaks that had not yet started to bud. Catherine did not begin with small talk. She told me that her firm handled a portfolio review for a client who held a commercial loan connected to Ibarra Development Group. During that review, her team had pulled the company's original formation documents from the Ohio Secretary of State's database. The Articles of Incorporation, filed in 2004, listed 2 members, Roberto Ibarra, 60%, and Rosa M. Ibarra, 40%. "Your grandmother was a co-founder of that company," Catherine said. "Her name is still on the original filing. It has never been amended." I did not speak for a long time. The information sat in front of me the way a key sits on a table, small, ordinary, capable of opening something enormous. "Did you know?" Catherine asked. "No," I said. And that was the truth. I did not know, not the specifics, not the percentages, not the filings. What I knew was that Abuela had always been closer to my father's work than anyone acknowledged. I knew she had loaned him money in the beginning. I knew she attended the first 2 closings because there were photographs in her apartment that no one in my family talked about. But I did not know she had owned 40% of the company my father spent 20 years treating as entirely his own. Catherine handed me a printout of the filing. I looked at Abuela's name, Rosa M. Ibarra, member, 40%, typed in a serif font on a government form that was 22 years old. It looked unremarkable. It looked like everything. "Whatever your father is restructuring," Catherine said, "he cannot remove a 40% membership interest without the consent of the interest holder, or, if that person is deceased, the consent of whoever legally inherited that interest. That is Ohio law. It is not ambiguous." "He told me he was having his attorney clean it up," I said. "There is nothing to clean up," Catherine said. "There is only someone who either holds that interest or does not. And that question depends on whether your grandmother left any assignment or bequest related to that stake." I thanked her. I stood up. She looked at me with an expression I had not seen directed at me in a long time. Not sympathy, not pity, but the quiet recognition of someone who understands what it means to hold a piece of paper that rewrites the story other people have been telling about you. I rode the elevator down. I walked to the bus stop in the pale March light. I rode the number 2 bus back to my apartment. I opened my front door, set my bag on the kitchen counter, and walked to my desk. I opened the bottom drawer. I picked up the manila envelope. The seal cracked along the edge where the glue had dried and thinned over 3 years. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a certified copy of the original Articles of Incorporation, the same filing Catherine had shown me, with Abuela's name printed clearly under members. The second was a notarized trust amendment, dated 11 months before Abuela's death, signed by Rosa M. Ibarra in a hand that was still perfectly steady, assigning her 40% membership interest in Ibarra Development Group to her granddaughter Marisol Ibarra, effective upon Rosa's death. The third was a single sheet of lined notebook paper, folded twice, with 5 words written in Abuela's block letters. Tu siempre fuiste la dueña. You were always the owner. I read all 3 documents twice. I placed them back inside the envelope. I put the envelope in my bag and I zipped the bag shut. The following Monday, my father had scheduled a meeting at the Ibarra Development Warehouse to formalize Diego's equity partnership. Attorney Navarro was present. Diego was present, sitting to our father's left with a pen in his hand and a stack of signature pages in front of him. My mother was not there. I arrived at 10 minutes past 9. I walked through the front door, a door I still did not have a key to. I climbed the stairs to my father's office. I set my bag on the floor beside the empty chair at the end of the conference table. I sat down. I placed my hands flat on the surface. I waited. My father looked at me from across the table. Attorney Navarro paused mid-sentence, his pen suspended above a yellow legal pad. Marisol, my father said, this is a restructuring meeting. It does not involve you. I reached into my bag. I took out the manila envelope. I placed it flat on the table between the coffee cups and the draft of the new operating agreement. I slid it 6 inches toward the center. Open it, I said. My father looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He did not move. What is this? He asked. Open it, I said again. I kept my hands on the table. Diego leaned forward. Marisol, what are you? It is for him, I said. My father picked up the envelope. He removed the 3 documents and laid them side by side on the table. He read the Articles of Incorporation, and his jaw set. He read the trust amendment, and his hands went still on the page, the kind of stillness that happens when the body has understood something that the mind is still refusing to assemble. He set the pages down. Where did you get these? He said. His voice was low. Abuela gave them to me, I said. Before she died. She told me not to open them until I needed to. My father looked at Attorney Navarro. The attorney had already reached across the table and taken the trust amendment. He read it with the slow, deliberate attention of a man who understands immediately what a document means but is choosing his next sentence carefully. Mr. Ibarra, Attorney Navarro said, this is a notarized assignment of membership interest properly executed under Ohio law. Under the current operating agreement, you cannot restructure ownership or dilute a member's interest without that member's written consent. He placed the document back on the table. Ms. Ibarra holds a 40% interest in this company. The room was still. Diego sat back in his chair. The pen he had been holding was now resting on the signature pages he would not be signing that morning. My father stared at the trust amendment as though it were a door that had opened in a wall he had always believed was solid. She never told me, he said. He was not speaking to anyone in the room. He was speaking to the photograph behind his desk, or to the leather chair, or to the version of his mother he had decided 20 years ago did not require consultation. She told me, I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not stand up. I folded my hands on the table, the same gesture he used every time he delivered a decision that he had already made before the room was asked, and I spoke to my father the way you speak to someone who has been reading the wrong version of a story for a very long time. You told me I was helpful, I said. At the dinner table on Brennan Court, with the coffee going cold and Diego already knowing and Carmen smiling like it was settled. You said I had been helpful. I paused. What I was actually doing that year and the 4 years before it was filing 20 quarterly tax returns without a single late submission. Not one penalty. Not one extension. Not one thank you. My father did not speak. His hands were flat on the table the way mine were. You called Dale Mercer and told him we found a double charge on page 7, I said. We. What I was actually doing was reviewing 11 pages of an itemized bid that you never read past the summary and catching a $41,000 error that would have come directly out of your margins. I kept my voice level. I did not speed up. I did not slow down. You told a room full of investors that your son put together the full package for the West Broad project, I said. Diego stood up and shook their hands. What I was actually doing was building a 41-slide financial presentation from nothing, alone, in 72 hours, while your son built nothing at all. I sat by the door holding the backup copies, and nobody in that room knew my name. Diego's eyes were on the table. He did not look up. He did not dispute a single word. You told me to find my own direction, I said, as if I had been visiting inside your company instead of carrying it. What I was actually doing was finding that direction, at a firm where a deaf man walked through the front doors and someone greeted him in his own language. The same language your mother taught me at her kitchen table when I was 6 years old. The language you never learned. I placed my hands flat on the table one more time. Then I stood. You wanted Attorney Navarro to clean up Abuela's name, I said. Her name is the reason this company exists. And her name stays. I picked up my bag. I walked to the door. I did not slam it. I did not turn around. The stairwell was quiet. The radiator was clanking the way it always did. I walked down the stairs, through the front door, and out into the morning. The air was cold and damp, and it tasted like March in Columbus, like the ground was thawing underneath everything, even the things that had been frozen so long you forgot they were ever soft. My mother called that evening. She did not mention the meeting. She never mentioned things directly. She asked if I had eaten. She asked if my apartment was warm enough. Then, after a long pause during which I could hear the kitchen faucet running in the background, she said, "Your father is very upset." "I know," I said. "He did not know about the papers," she said. "Abuela knew," I said. That was enough. My mother was quiet. I could hear her breathing, and beyond that, the faint sound of a television in the other room. My father watching something or pretending to. "Your grandmother always said you were the one who paid attention," she said. I did not answer. I held the phone against my ear and looked out the window at the parking lot below, where the streetlight cast a yellow circle on the asphalt that did not quite reach my car. Diego texted me the following afternoon. The message was 4 words long. "You earned it, Mari." He did not apologize for the years of silence. He did not explain why he had accepted credit for work he did not do. But those 4 words were the most honest thing my brother had ever said to me, and I read them 3 times before I set my phone down. Abuela Rosa died at 79 in a hospital room in Hilliard with the window cracked open because she liked to feel moving air on her face, even when she could no longer sign to tell anyone so. She lived most of her life in silence. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she understood early that saying something and being heard are 2 entirely different acts, and only one of them is under your control. She also built a company. Or, more precisely, she provided the $22,000 down payment for the first duplex renovation that became Ibarra Development Group, money from a settlement she received after a workplace injury at the factory where she had spent 19 years. She gave that money to her son, my father, on a handshake and a set of formation documents filed with the state of Ohio. She did not ask for recognition. She did not ask to be featured on the website or seated in the leather chair. She signed the papers, took her 40%, and went home to her apartment in Hilliard, where she continued to live on a fixed income for the rest of her life while the company her money helped build grew into 14 active projects and a warehouse office on East Main Street. What I have learned, what that Tuesday morning in the lobby taught me, and what the envelope sealed with my grandmother's steady handwriting finally confirmed, is that the people who build the most are often the ones who are seen the least. Not because they are invisible. Because the people standing next to them have learned that looking closely costs something. It costs acknowledgement. It costs sharing the credit. It costs rearranging the shape of your pride to include someone you had already decided was not supposed to be inside it. I do not run Ibarra Development Group. Not yet, and maybe not ever in the way my father ran it, from the leather chair with the door open so the building could hear him being in charge. But I hold 40% of it, and we are in mediation, and Attorney Navarro sends documents that I review the way I have always reviewed documents. Line by line, page by page, missing nothing. That part of me has not changed. It was never the part that needed to. Catherine Whitfield offered me a full-time analyst position at her firm 2 weeks after the meeting at the warehouse. I accepted. My desk is on the second floor, near a window that seals properly in the winter. I have my own login, my own client list, and a key to the building that I carry on a ring next to the spare key for my apartment. I have a key. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think of someone in your own family who has been filing the returns and answering the calls and standing outside every morning waiting for someone else to unlock the door, I would ask you to share it with them. Not because they need to hear your voice to know what they have done, but because sometimes the most important thing you can offer a person who has been unseen is to let them know that someone, somewhere, finally saw the same thing they did. Some people build the house. Some people keep it standing. And sometimes the person holding the key is not the one who earned it. This story is fictional. All names, characters, events, and situations are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental.